But the consistent thread with everyone is they had a really kind of laser sharp determination in what they were doing mattered.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch. We'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. The link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. Have you got the right mindset? Struggling to sit down and concentrate? All right, this isn't quite an infomercial for some kind of dodgy law firm. It's going to be a little tip that I have for you later about, mindset. But before that, let's chat with Sara Bliss, writer, digital content strategist, and more importantly, a New York Times best-selling author, which is a first for the Marketing Study Lab podcast. Sara's latest book, Take the Leap, features stories of those men and women that have radically changed their careers and ultimately their lives. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of learnings to be had here. But more on that later, as I'll let Sara explain what the book is more about in detail. This is Sara's 11th book, after such titles as Hotel Chic at Home and Bobbi Brown, Pretty Powerful. So you can imagine she knows what she's talking about when she writes. Sara's career also spans a multitude of writing positions, such as senior writer and editor for Yahoo, with articles also published in the Wall Street Journal and Esquire, just to name a few from a long list. So with all this, there was obviously only one question I wanted to ask an author to start this off. Sara, what's that one word that spell check always corrects?
XOXO. It always changes it to Coco. And it drives me bananas because if you just do XO, then you're fine. But I mean, if you're super enthusiastic, the way I am with everything as a writer, I mean, I always, add on and there's more adjectives and it's bigger and better. So I don't like to just have one XO, and I get super annoyed that the spell check people could not figure that out.
Yeah, you don't want just one XO. That's terrible.
No,
you need at least
right?
two. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
So tell me, what's the story that's brought you to this stage of your career as writer, digital content strategist, and brand advisor?
So I started out in the art world actually just because that was my major in college. I just loved those classes and kind of grew up in museums, and my mom's an artist. And even though I always wanted to be a writer, I just was so, fascinated with that kind of side of work and the world. But then I went into, really quickly, I realized it wasn't for me, and I went into magazines. I took the leap. I needed to go back to school and take some courses at night in order to do that. And it was a great career. I mean, I started off as an assistant editor, and I went freelance probably way sooner than I should have, because I got married and moved to Boston. But it was great. I wrote 2 books up there, and I thought I would have a career as a book writer and magazine writer that would be pretty seamless. But in 2008, really everything changed for magazines. And in all honesty, the writing was kind of on the wall even before then, with digital content. So I had to pivot to a number of things. I had to really learn how to write for the internet, which is a very, very different thing than writing for print. And I had to decide to do a whole brand consulting side of my business. So that meant ghostwriting books, ghostwriting speeches, launching websites, doing brand content, in-house magazines, catalogs, kind of anything that was needed. And that allowed me to stay in business as on the editorial side, because the money from the brands is much larger than the money on the editorial side. And that is not saying that it's it's that lucrative. It's more a reflection of how low it is on the editorial side. But having that balance has really helped me. And then I did work at Yahoo for a couple of years as a senior writer and editor, and now I have a Forbes column. And then I'm back in the book world as an author on my own, which I'm really, really loving. This is the book I've always wanted to write.
That's excellent. So that moves us fantastically on to your latest book, Take the Leap. Can you explain what that's all about?
Sure. Take the Leap is about people that make radical life and career changes. I featured 63 really inspiring, fascinating stories of people who, in all ages, all backgrounds, all types of career switches, as sharing their stories and letting other people know, where the hurdles are and how they did it financially, and what was tough and what was easy and what they would do over. All those questions that I thought if someone wanted to make a similar kind of change would be asking. And the real concept behind it is that the best people to talk to when you want to make a change are people who have already done it. And I feel that way in every aspect of my life, whether it's been having children or, moving to a neighborhood or starting a different kind of job. I mean, I've always sought out those people who have already done it. And that's really the crux of this book. And I think a lot of the career books tend to be stories of, one perspective and one kind of, usually it's business success or a founder. And I think for people who want to find success in a lot of different kinds of careers and a lot of different kinds of arenas, I mean, I have, food and wellness and philanthropy, there aren't as many stories for them. There isn't as much advice. So I wanted to do a really, really broad stretch of people so that everyone can find a story to relate with and forge their own path if they want to leap.
And I think the fact that you've added those tough parts into it is fantastic, because, like you say, it's easy to get consumed in maybe social or just other books in general that are just so positive, and you need that positivity. But what people want to see and hear and read are the tough parts, but how to get out of them as well.
Absolutely. And the biggest question that I get from people is, all about financially. A lot of people want to do this, but they just don't think that they can do it financially. So I found a lot of people in the book that really had something, on the line, or they didn't have money to launch a business, but they figured out how to do it anyway. There are a lot of people who you'll find are, whether you just are anxious about it or, unsure, or you have people around you telling you your idea is crazy or whatever it is, you'll find kind of other stories of people who struggled and made it through. And those are always my favorite stories.
So there's 63 stories, and I'm sure you've had multiple others of people's success. What do you think holds people back from maybe what they feel is something that's an impossible target?
I think there is a real... I think it's twofold. I think partly what you were alluding to before is I think a lot of the stories about people who made these switches, they make it seem easy. They'll be like, dancer turned, software engineer or whatever, and they don't really get into the steps that it takes to do that, or they gloss over them, or and so I feel like a lot of people think, oh gosh, that happens to other people. That happens to people who are like maybe more all on Instagram and making everything look perfect. But the reality is, everybody can make these kinds of changes. And I think the whole point of all the stories is to have the proof. But I also think there's this lack of comfort with risk. And I think there's a lot of like Instagram advice and career coach advice all about, you've got to get comfortable with failure, and failure, is good for you. And I agree with that. But I also think you shouldn't. I agree with that to an extent, like failure is just a part of life. But it's not that the people in the book got comfortable with failure or overcame their fears. They got comfortable with the fear aspect, and they got comfortable with risk. And with risk, you have the possibility of failure, but you also have the possibility of great success. And so I think when you go into it with that mindset, there were a lot of people who said, you know what, I decided to do this, and I figured if it didn't work, I could go back to my other job. And that seems so simple. And I think that took the burden off of them of feeling like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm ruining my life, or what if this doesn't work? And the question to ask is, what if it does? And then obviously think about, and be prepared enough that you're ready for financial obstacles or whatever hurdles there are. And I think, you get the education that you need to do it. The preparation part is key, but I think you also need to really, really just get comfortable with the idea of risk and the amazing possibilities that come from risk.
Yeah, I absolutely, completely agree. And without taking those risks or doing things that you've never done before, the change just won't happen, because it just won't, because you need to change for other things to have an impact, for those to change as well. And I can't remember who it was or the time frame, but they said a statement and it stuck with me, and it said something along the lines of, it took me 10 years to be an overnight success.
Oh, yes, exactly. Exactly. I've been doing these events around the country, doing interviews with people in the book. And one of the women in the book started out with a baby food business that she started in her kitchen. And now her biggest client is Walmart, which is, the biggest retailer in the States, mass retailer. And she made a big point to say, well, this has taken me 8 years. I mean, this was a long struggle, and I made a lot of mistakes, and, I wasn't always feeling like this was going to work. And I really had her expand on that when we talked in person, and people loved that and loved hearing that, and a lot of the people in the book are actually making more money in their new jobs, but it took time to get there. I mean, it certainly doesn't happen in a year. And maybe not even, 4. I mean, it really takes time, and these changes are not easy. But everyone in the book is so much happier. And as I said, most of them are actually making more money, which I found super surprising.
Yeah. Speaking of taking time, you've written, is it 11 books now?
Yes, so I've written 7 as a ghostwriter and 4 on my own.
Oh, fantastic. And a whole host of other content, that aside.
Yes.
Okay, so blank sheet of paper. How do you get started? Is there a process you follow? Is it different every time? Take us through that.
Well, I am a working mom, so my process is I get my kids out of the house and I start writing.
You've got to have a plan, right?
Yeah, or after they're asleep, those tend to be my writing hours. I find, the whole dreamy idea that, a lot of writers are waiting for inspiration to strike, or worried about writer's block. Like, I don't really have the luxury for either of those things. I need to pay the bills and get my stories in on time. And so I just start. I mean, I tend to do a lot of research. I'm always reading. A lot of people now know that I'm in this pivot space, especially now that I have this Forbes column on career pivots. So I also get a lot of pitches. Instagram, surprisingly, is actually a place where a lot of people reach out to me. And I also see stories that that I find interesting. But for me, it's a combination of doing a lot of research, and then when I write, I've got to bang it out.
Absolutely. So when you're writing for different brands or people, they must have very different tones of voice or characters that you have to portray or come across in a different way. How do you make sure you get that right?
So I don't really know. I find it's a little bit like channeling somebody and trying to channel their vibe. I think I've written profiles for so long that it's made me very good at that, at capturing people's voices. I really, really, when I write about someone, I want to get to the heart of who they are. And I really honor that. I feel like it's a real gift to me that people share their story with me, and I want to honor that. And then when I work with brands, it's the same thing. I'm always happy to have the work, and I want to do the best job I can. And oftentimes, people tell you what they are hoping, and then you have to kind of translate that. So with a brand, they'll say, we want to come across as more relatable or cooler, or we want to target this demographic. And I just kind of put on that hat and try and come up with the language and the vibe that they're looking for. I'm just so used to it at this point. I'm not quite sure how I do it. I think I've done it for so long. I started really writing profiles, and that was what lit me up as a writer. So, I kind of cut my teeth into that, but it doesn't mean that I would be perfect for every brand. I mean, I think there's lots of brands where maybe my style isn't quite right. And I think I've been lucky about is like brands I've worked with. Bobbi Brown is a great example, and Aaron Lauder. And even though they're both completely different, I've been able to kind of understand where they're coming from and what they're hoping to convey, and I've been able to do that.
And I think, in essence, that's what a good writer does. So you must be a good writer. Sorry, go on.
To be honest, it's probably come a little bit at the expense of writing about myself. I think I'm not quite as comfortable in that arena. I'm not as good writing about myself as I am about writing other people. Mm-hmm. And that's something I need to work on. That's like my goal for the next 10 years is to kind of master my own voice a little bit better.
Well, you must have a whole host of stories that you can link into your own voice and produce something quite amazing, because your backstory is pretty eventful in terms of who you've written for and what you've done. But coming to the present and going back to Take the Leap, when you were talking to these people, were there any similarities between them? Or did they all follow a different path?
So the reasons why people left were all like wildly different. I mean, I had some people who were just having like terrible anxiety symptoms or dealing with depression or PTSD, or some people just wanted to be happier. Some people just wanted to live a more exotic life, or other people wanted to be out of an office. Some people wanted to help people. So the reasons were really, really varied. But the consistent thread with everyone is they had a really kind of laser sharp determination in what they were doing mattered, and was important to them, and whether it mattered because they were kind of helping a community and doing something larger than themselves, or it mattered because they wanted that financial independence, or it mattered because they wanted they had a vision for a brand that they felt strongly needed to be out in the world. They had a real determination and they were invested in their idea. And I think when you're really invested in something and it means something to you, then you're even more motivated to follow it through and make it into a success.
I completely agree with that, and I completely see where people are coming from. It could be money, but it's that motivation and that determination to want something, and when you want something and you have that passion, it can be so powerful. And I think what you were saying right at the very start is that needs to override your anxiety and your fears, and that's when the goal happens.
Absolutely. I really agree with that. And I think the other thing is that so many people are very, very, they really accept the fact that there are going to be hurdles. And, there were some really, really big hurdles that people faced where like one person might experience that and be like, oh, that's a sign from the universe. This isn't meant to be. I shouldn't do this. It's not working out and it's time to give up. Whereas a lot of these people just saw it as part of the process and they would see a hurdle and figure out a way around it. I mean, I had one couple who wanted to open a restaurant in the Caribbean. They had the idea, they found a space, they, made plans to move, but it took them 3 years to sell their restaurant in the States, to, get housing and schools and find the right spot. I mean, it took some time, and they didn't see any of the hurdles that happened to them. I mean, they had a few deals fall through. They had the guy that they were going to buy the restaurant for change his mind at the last minute and tell them he didn't want to sell it. But they figured a way around it, and now they run like the most successful restaurant in Anguilla, so in the Caribbean. So, I think that determination and acceptance that change is hard, it's not going to be easy, and hurdles are going to happen. Is a great mindset. It's a really, I call it the pivot mindset. It's just, it means you're going to be successful.
Pivot mindset. I love that. That's
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll admit I'm not the best writer, and I honestly do find it difficult at times. It's just writing just isn't my thing. So for those, including myself, that find it difficult but may have to get writing done for an essay or an assignment and are struggling, what tips could you give them that might help?
Oh, I think it's great if you have, an outline is so helpful. And if you have an idea where you're going, I don't think your outline should be too in depth. I think that people can spend, I think for some people they need that like massive structure, but I think just having a sense of how you want something structured and where you're going with it and where you want to end up and the point you want to make at the end, that can help you, do it successfully. And then also at the end of the day, like, I think we all read these amazing books growing up, and, we all grew up reading Dickens and Shakespeare and all of these things. And, sometimes we have a sense of what good writing is. And one of the things I notice with young people, especially, is they get caught up in this idea that being a good writer means using a lot of like fancy and big words and trying to sound super intellectual on paper. But I don't subscribe to that at all. I think you should write the way you speak. I think if you were telling someone this information and wanting them to be compelled and engaged and excited about it, how would you talk to them about it? And then write the way that you would speak. I mean, obviously it has to be finessed a little more on paper, but not that much. I mean, I really write in a tone that's very conversational, that's very easy to read. It's not too, I want to, make things not too complicated, but I want people to think of big ideas. I want people to look at things a different way. I want people to open their minds when they read my stuff. But in order to do that, I just feel like I have to be really real. And I think the more true you are to who you are as a person when you write, the more successful you'll be as a writer.
That's really good advice, that I need to take on board. And there's nothing like being yourself, and people need to do that more often, in my opinion, because that's what people want to hear.
Yes, absolutely.
So I used to look at failing as failing, and it was, no, you don't do that. But I suppose that's part of, particularly in the UK, part of the educational system. You don't fail, you pass. But yeah, and let's not start on the educational system. But now I see it as a big part of just purely learning. For those that are listening that may have failed, say, an assignment, a qualification, an exam, or even have just been given really bad feedback, it can be massively disheartening. And I've been there as well in it, and it is. The people that you've the people that you've spoken to. I'm not only bad at English and writing, I can't even speak now. Sorry. The people that you're speaking to, have you got any advice from them to these people that might see failure as they're losing and they're not good and trying to move past it?
Yeah, it's interesting. The most successful people don't tend to, they realize how much failure helps them, I feel like, tweak and make things better, whether it's how they communicate, how they do things, how they run a business, how they launch a business, how they pitch a business. Having something not work can often lead you in a better direction. And I think if you get too bogged down by this idea that, you suck and failure is the worst thing that has ever happened to you, and that this means something, that it means something about you. If you get too bogged down in that idea, I think it can really, really hold you back. But I think if you see it, if you learn something from it and you take something away from it, then it's a win. It's actually not bad. I mean, especially as a writer, I've had so much rejection. I mean, and it really, I used to be, more kind of in my head, and I would pitch editors and my voice would be shaking and I was so insecure and nervous. And I remember getting to a place, and it took me a long time. It probably took almost 10 years for me to get to this place where I was like, I realized that if someone didn't like my idea, it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with what they were looking for. Maybe they didn't like my writing, but that's okay. That just means that it's not the right fit. And then I realized the more people I pitched, I would tweak ideas. I never gave up on good ideas. I would just tweak them and make them better. And so the less personally I took it, and the more I used it as fuel to do better the next time, or, connect with someone in a strong way, the better I did. But I think if you fail at something, I failed physics in high school. I think it's a funny story. I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, and I had gone from being a straight A student, so it was a big shock to me to fail at anything. At the time, I probably wasn't as laughing about it. But in retrospect, failing at things at school, especially, like, it's not that it doesn't matter. You don't want to fail your classes, but, as long as you learn from these things and give it your all the next time, you're okay.
Yeah. Learning from things, that's a win. It's not a fail. It's always a win.
Absolutely.
So speaking of wins, quick fire questions. Are you ready for these?
Yes.
Excellent. Now, the first one's a tricky one. Name one must-read business book.
So I have to tell you, I don't like most business books. I don't, and I wrote Take the Leap to kind of shake it up a little bit. I find a lot of them are really unrelatable. However, I love Barbara Corcoran's books. She's actually in the book. She's one of the experts in the book. She is on Shark Tank. She's, had 23 jobs before she was 22. She started $1 billion real estate brand with $1,000. She's an entrepreneur, and she is one of the most relatable people I have ever spoken to. She has just nonstop brilliant advice. And I shared some of it in the book, and I love her books. They're quick reads. You learn so much from them, and they're fun, and she has a sense of humor. And I love that about her.
That's cool. What was the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I Googled, probably today, my son was watching the Madoff movie on HBO, and so I was Googling all about that last night too. to kind of inform him about, it's such a hard story to believe. I mean, he's 14, so he wasn't, he was 4 years old at the time that all happened. And it's such a hard story to believe that's true. Like, how did that even happen? It's so horrible. So we had a lot of, and so tragic. So I did a lot of Googling about that case last night.
Okay. What is your most used app at the moment?
Instagram, 100%. 100%. I find it to be like a really great platform for a lot of reasons. I think there's a lot of positivity on it. It's not like Twitter, which can get a little weird. And it feels like a safe space as a woman too. Like Twitter does not feel that way always. Wow. So I love having that space. And I feel like there's a lot of uplifting. People uplift other people on Instagram. Everyone wants to shout out like other people who are doing great things. And I love that about it.
And I think people forget that, again, that's another place for content and good, valuable content.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really smart and well done content there. And it's just such a great visual medium. And I think whatever your interest is, whether you're interested in, business or marketing or financial success or, the people who do a lot of manifesting, they're all on there. And it's nice to kind of have that reinforcement sometimes of the things that you're interested in, and you can kind of, target your feed to whatever you want to be focused on.
Second to last question. Books, blogs, or articles?
I love books. I really do. I mean, I love the pace of writing books. I love reading books. I just think there's something so valuable in them. And I love seeing how independent bookstores in the U.S., I'm not sure about the U.K., but in the U.S. they are thriving. Every year for the past 10 years, there have been more, and they're doing really well.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see.
What? I don't know if you've got one, you might have a few, but what's your favorite book?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. Let me think. What is my favorite book? I love anything by Nora Ephron. I love her essays. They just make me happy, and I read them again and again. I love my friend Christina Alger is a great novelist, and she has a new book coming out in July, and every time I open one of her books, I'm so excited, and I know I'm going to stay up super late reading it. I love Jane Green. She's British, but lives in the U.S. She writes lots of very light and fun books. I tend to like things that take me out of my headspace or teach me something that I'm obsessed with at the moment.
Excellent. Final question. If people want to get in touch with you or go and buy Take the Leap, which off the back of this I'd advised they do, where should they go?
So actually, Take the Leap is available on Amazon in the UK, which I'm excited about. I think it just recently launched there. And there's a woman in the book who's from London who started a business on YouTube at 65. Her name is Trisha Cusden. But anyway, so they can also go to my website, sarabliss.com, SARA, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Sara Bliss NYC. And I definitely hope people will read Take the Leap. And the nice thing is there's such a breadth of content in there and types of people that it really will appeal to so many different kinds of people.
Well, you've sold it to me. That's that's on the wish list tonight, believe me. Sara, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate this.
Thanks so much once again, Sara, for joining us. And here are my main takeaways from that little chat with Sara. Now, in researching and writing the book Take the Leap, Sara discovered that switching careers isn't easy, as the book covers the good and the bad parts of this transition. which is the same as a CIM qualification. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, there will be challenges and changes in your lifestyle that are required to fit in the studying, the researching, and the writing. But do it anyway, as this is where the magic happens, and we all have it in us to make those changes. When writing for different brands, Sara explained that it's all about translation and understanding who the brand is and what it stands for. Again, similar connotations can be seen within a CIM assignment. You must remember who you are writing for and why. You must translate what you are saying into something that is easy to understand and will gain the marks required. And finally, if you're struggling with writing your assignment, first find an outline and an idea of where you need to go with your answer. Then you can start to give it structure, focusing on the key points. Make it compelling, engaging, and above all, your own. And finally, the top tip this week is mindset. So you sit down to start your CM assignment, and all you can think about is the thousands of excuses why not to do it right now. Gotta wash my cup up, do some washing, ironing, check the footy score, wondering what's happening on Instagram. All those kinds of things run through your mind. And it's easy to do when you feel like there's a mountain to climb in front of you. So get off your own back and listen to these short tips that will help you knock your assignment into shape. So firstly, where do you do your best work? Ask yourself that. Do you need silence, music, inspiration, a clean space? Whatever it is, find it. Lay everything out so you're comfortable with your surroundings and get to work. Flip the phone. Put your phone on silent and turn it over. Or even put it in a different room under a pillow, anywhere. It's easy to get distracted by a ping or a red dot. Get a brew, water, snacks, so you haven't got those excuses that, oh, well, I'll just go and grab this, shall I? Or do that. Make sure everything you need for you to feel comfortable is within reach. And finally, and most importantly, take breaks regularly. Only 5 or 10 minutes, but take them. Set a timer on your phone. Again, if it's in a different room, make sure you can hear the timer before you flip it and hide it or wherever it's going to be. Set it for around 40 or 50 minutes or longer if you feel comfortable with that. And dive deep into your work for this set time period. Then take a break. Give yourself some space and let what you've written stew for a while. When you come back to it, you may see it from a different angle or know you have nailed it first time. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.